So there was this story that came out from Nick Picoro of the AZ Central. It was actually a really good read. I am not much of a scavenging the internet for all the crooks and crannies, for all the deepest stories. I read all the big stuff, but this really takes the cake. The other day, Nick Picoro put out an article that basically described some of the frustrations between the Arizona Diamondbacks and, of course, the Ketel Marte. And it was kind of interesting because we haven't talked about the Diamondbacks in months, because regardless of what this show is, which is covering all Arizona sports, and my favorite teams, the Sun Devils, the Diamondbacks, the Suns, the Cardinals, I'm not going to talk about you unless you give me a reason to talk about you. And the Diamondbacks are giving me a reason to talk about them for all the wrong reasons. And there's a lot of stuff going on social media that's even more annoying than that. But the other day, Nick Picoro wrote an article basically talking about the Diamondbacks being fed up with the coddling nature that has been Ketel Marte and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Apparently, the house robbery incident that kept him out the first couple of games of the season was mostly due to the fact because he was just vacationing in the Dominican Republic. And apparently, he came back to the United States because his house got robbed. There was no instance that he was taking time off to grieve or whatever, and that really spiraled into Ketel Marte asking for days off that Torey Lovullo does not give him, and that the Diamondbacks and the Diamondbacks and Ketel Marte are at a little bit of wits' ends with each other because of the coddlingness that happens with Ketel. And here's a couple of things I took from that story. And that's this. Ultimately, I do not care if there is some coddling of stars in baseball and basketball. In the NFL, it's a little bit different at the quarterback position because so much rides on that position. But Ketel Marte is a next level player. He is one of the best players in the major leagues. He is a top two second baseman in the MLB, probably at worst, him being the second or third best. And so when I hear a story comes out that there's some coddling going on for a superstar in baseball, I'm not shocked, and I'm not going to act shocked. However, what I will say and do is the following things are a little frustrating. Ketel has continued to let Torey Lovullo take the fall for the egregious off days during the most inopportune times of the Diamondbacks season. And oftentimes we would get upset with Torey Lovullo. What are you doing? Why are you resting this guy? The Diamondbacks desperately need this guy to start performing now, but that wasn't the case. He would sit and we thought it was a Torey thing, when in actuality, it was a Ketel Marte thing. And it's coming out now that Ketel Marte is probably the baseball version, a little lesser than that, than Kevin Durant. He's very sensitive. He hears everything. He doesn't like the things that are being thrown his way. There are some things that are real things, like his mother incident earlier this year. You just don't go there. And then there's the other things that are asking for off days, especially in the most inopportune times. Torey Lovullo admitted last week he had no idea Ketel Marte was missing their first couple of games to start the end of the All-Star break. To start the second half of the season. They had no idea. Because Ketel Marte just basically played hooky and went to the Dominican Republic. So this piece comes out and on Thursday, and the Diamondbacks lose 3 straight to the Colorado Rockies and effectively end again any chances of them making a hallmark story to the playoffs. Just being a team that has the ability to get to the playoffs. So with that being the case, it's a little frustrating with what Ketel Marte did. And reading the article, he is a bit coddled. And one of the things that is so frustrating about it is, what in the world are the Arizona Diamondbacks doing? Coddling a star, especially in the second half to start the season, when you're not necessarily sure if you're a buyer or a seller, and letting him play hooky in the Dominican Republic. Oftentimes, this is not just a Ketel Marte problem. This is a too much coddling problem coming down from the Arizona Diamondbacks. And then there's the third point. The backlash against Arizona sports media, because the timing of the article that was released regarding Ketel Marte and the Arizona Diamondbacks is a main reason why the Diamondbacks are struggling. The Diamondbacks just lost 3 straight to the Colorado Rockies. Do you want to know who the worst team in the major leagues? Do you want to know the worst team in baseball is right now? The Colorado Rockies. They've got 35 wins on the season. And you're blaming a piece written by a journalist who had information and whose job is to report that information on the Diamondbacks shortcomings? You know, here's a little dose of reality for the Arizona sports fan who thinks everything else is someone else's fault. Let's just be fair with what it is. The narrative that Arizona sports media is being too mean and that's why teams are struggling is so beyond lazy. I am once again asking you to hold your teams more accountable. Just slightly. Because this story coming out has absolutely nothing to do with the Diamondback season. You know what does? The fact that Torey Lovullo has continuously mismanaged this team throughout the year. The fact that the bullpen has imploded day in and day out. The fact that there's injuries oftentimes. Gabriel Moreno, where the hell has he been? The fact that Zach Gallen has not been the same pitcher post-All-Star break of the World Series run 2 years ago. The last thing on the list is the fact that Arizona sports media is being a little mean. So yeah, when this story came out, my first thought was, yeah, there's coddling in all sports for all superstars. Depending how great you are, the distraction and your play, if your play outweighs the distraction, you're going to get more leeway. And it's not just like that in sports. Can we all act like adults for a second? In every single business or place of work, there is favoritism. And ultimately, Ketel Marte got that favoritism. So that's not the problem. The issue is fans and people not holding Ketel Marte accountable. Because in that article, it basically says Ketel Marte is an amazing player when he wants to be. And he wants to be often. But it's a real slap in the face to guys like Randall Grichuk, Merrill Kelly, and Zach Gallen, who 2 of those guys were traded, had to up and move their life. Because in the second half of the season, when Ketel Marte wasn't there, this team spiraled even further out of control. And the Diamondbacks decided to sell. This is not just how does it affect Ketel Marte. This is real life stuff. And Josh Naylor, and Eugenio Suarez, and Randall Grichuk, and Merrill Kelly, all guys that enjoyed being here, ended up getting traded away. And this is not news to me. I've heard about the issues with Ketel Marte that I don't really think are that big of issues. Because superstar has a little bit of an ego. It happens everywhere. In businesses, in places of works, in sports. What I won't stand for is the latter of all of those things. Which is the fact that Arizona sports media would have anything to do with this. Anything at all. So it's just absolute nonsense. The only people that are to blame for the Diamondbacks' shortcomings this year is the bullpen, is Torey, is Zach Gallen not being the same player, is overall the Diamondbacks falling flat on their face is because of them, not because of pieces that came out. I hate to break it to you, but this is part of the job. You get paid millions of dollars, a minute, an hour, a day to play a game. And our job is to critique you, have opinions, and oftentimes report things that are a little squirmish. And so, talking to even the Geraldo Perdomo thing, oh, please stop talking about Ketel. No, we will. We're going to. I appreciate what Geraldo Perdomo did yesterday. Came out to the media and said, trying to stand up for his guy and be a leader. And for all that, I totally respect that. But stop talking about Ketel. He's a very sensitive guy. He just wants to play baseball. We love him. That ain't it, dude. It just ain't. We have a job to do. You have a job to do. Yours is to play and win games. And if you do the latter part of those things, winning and playing games, we're not going to talk about anything that has anything to do outside of how great this team is. But because of your guys' shortcomings, reports are coming out on why the season might have gotten turned on its head. And Ketel Marte's ego is just one thing on a laundry list of things that are issues, along with Torey Lovullo's mismanagement, and probably you should move on from him, to Zach Gallen not being the same pitcher, to the bullpen imploding. So no, Ketel Marte doesn't even have a 15% hand in this. But he's got a 5. He's got a 10% hand. The other things were bigger. But it's just absolutely crazy. Leave our guy alone. No, we won't. We're going to hold our teams accountable. And we're going to report and talk about and give opinions on things that are a little, not exactly the thing you want to hear. But that's the best way to be a team that is eventually contending in baseball. So I like Geraldo Perdomo. I like what he did, sticking up for his guy. However, that ain't it, dude. Don't try to tell us not to do our job and not to give opinions and not to report. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the story said Ketel was awesome and an amazing player, and the Diamondbacks are really unlikely to trade him. But he played hooky a few times, and it got under people's skin. If that's too much for Ketel Marte to read, look in the mirror and say, maybe I should have a little less of an ego, that's a him issue. That ain't an us issue. So blaming the sports media in Phoenix for being a little mean for your team's shortcomings, oh my God, look in the mirror. Your bullpen sucks. Torey Lovullo has mismanaged this team left and right throughout the season. Zach Gallen is not the same player. And Ketel Marte, who is arguably your best player, has a bit of an ego. There's a lot of things that plays a hand in this team's disastrous season. And not one of them is the Arizona sports media is being a little mean.